Welcome back to Artist Alchemy, everyone. I am John Cruz. I am a portrait photographer based in Philadelphia in the United States.
I'm Steph. I'm a fantasy photographer based in Lincoln in the UK.
And today our guest is Christopher Vena. Christopher is an artist of multi-talents. You are both a painter and a photographer. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So glad you could take the time to join us today. Yeah, this is a casual conversation. We like to talk to creative people about their process. So I'd love to hear about your background, like what your path was to the art form and how you found your voice.
Um, found my. I still don't know if I found my voice. I'm getting close. like, but let's see. I grew up in like around San Diego area. I started taking like college drawing and painting classes while I was still in high school there. I transferred to the San Francisco Art Institute when I was like, or from one of the local community colleges when I was like 20, I think. And then I studied abroad in Paris for half a year at the École des Beaux-Arts. I graduated. I moved to Seattle. I started like a studio practice up there. I was showing around town for a while. Then I got married, and then I moved to Istanbul. I lived there for about 4 years, and then came back to the U.S. to go to graduate school at ASU, which is why I'm here in Tempe still now. That was in 2014, and I've just been working and teaching around here ever since. But I mean, throughout that time, I've been painting. Photography is a little bit more of a recent thing, mostly because I was taking reference photos. But I happened to have on my graduate like thesis committee a really like well-known photographer, and he kind of like took me under his wing a little bit and showed me the ropes because I was photographing things like there were a lot of big kind of riots and protests and things like that were happening in Arizona between like 2015 up to like 2020. So I attended a lot of those, and I took a lot of photos that I based my paintings on. I also did a series of prints from that, and I made like a short installation video at the same time. Sorry if I'm rambling. It's like
No, because it's fascinating because like just to kind of like piece back, like even your environmental like influences are so diverse. My background is I have a degree in architecture. So like when I think of like the Beaux-Arts school of like I think of like the architecture that came out of that, the very structural, the boulevards and then Istanbul has its own architectural like
oh, yeah.
language and you have the Hagia Sophia and then the mosque that followed with it. What's the architect's name? Sinan, I think, is he's the most prolific architect like that we've ever
seen.
like he just
named after him there.
yeah, it's a beautiful city. But then like Southern California, then Northern California, and then the Pacific Northwest, and now in Arizona, like just like philosophically, they're just different places.
Yeah.
How has that like kind of like do you take your setting and say, let me see how I connect to this setting and then bring it along with me? Like, is that, or do you reset every time you're inspired?
No, I try to have it be related to wherever I am at the time. But sometimes things like um, sort of follow me. Like, for example, when I was living in Turkey, the third year that I was there, this was like 2013. There was a really huge like anti-government protest that summer, and they actually like the protesters sort of took over the center of the main like tourist part of the city. Like literally, they built barricades with like burned out buses and stuff, and kept out the police and everything.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a little. It reminded me of what I heard about like the Paris Commune. It was like a party atmosphere. It was like everybody was like, it was amazing. And then when the police came and cracked down on it, it was like terrifying. and I had a friend who lived right in the middle of that area, so when I would go see him, I I saw a lot of what was going on there, and I took a lot of photographs, and so that kind of wound up right about the time that I moved to Arizona, and right when I got to Arizona is when all that big protest movement started. It came here. It like
Are
followed.
you the problem?
Yeah, I guess so.
You're a pop star. You
Yeah.
show up and like,
So yeah, the work I did to get into grad school was based on my documentation of like the protest movement in Turkey.
mhm.
And so my graduate thesis became about the movement here in Arizona. Um, and but I expanded it from just painting to like painting. I did some monotype prints. I exhibited some photographs too, and there was a video component as well. I
So do
kind of
you,
do. Oh,
sorry, go
sorry.
on,
Go ahead.
go on, carry on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, video is a newer thing for me. Um, Actually, I studied the Art Institute didn't offer a minor, but if I had had a minor, it would have been in film, but like literal film. Like they showed us how to work on like a 16 millimeter Bolex,
Yeah.
and um, I don't even know where I would find one of them. Actually, I have one that's broken, but um, I don't know where I would get film developed or anything like that. So my knowledge of videography comes from film. So it took me a while to sort of like adapt. Although digital video is so much easier. Like
Mhm.
you don't have to have light meters and stuff like that. It does it all for you, which is nice. But but now I kind of do it as like a side gig. If people want documentation or of things that they're doing. I've done reference photos for Lisa, actually your cousin, who's also a really amazing painter, who kind of put me in touch with you. Um, I did some photography for her that ended up turning into some of her paintings. Um, Again, I think I lost the thread again. What was I talking about? Sorry.
Oh, video and like you're dipping into video and some of the reference using that.
Yeah. Well, I haven't. Yeah, but I don't know if I would consider that sort of like my main. I haven't done it in a few years now. I got really into it for a few years. I kind of like go back and forth. The main
Yeah.
constant is always painting, but the other stuff comes and goes, I think.
Would you say that, because obviously you spoke about like the protests and stuff like that, would you say you take a lot of inspiration from like conflict and kind of use your art as a way of to kind of narrate that situation or navigate through it?
I did. Um, I don't so much anymore, because I did it for about like 10 years almost, and it was just, I thought it was important. I wanted to like sort of, I don't know if the word is like raise awareness. It's not exactly it, but I kept thinking about these things I was seeing, and they reminded me of like history paintings and things that were going on around like
Mhm.
the French Revolution, and like things like that, like Jericho's paintings and David's paintings and things like that. Um, and I wanted to sort of put these events on the same level, sort of the way that like Kehinde Wiley does with portraits of people from the street that he puts into like scenarios that look like old old master portraits of people. I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to make history paintings of the history that I was seeing.
Yeah.
Um, but I was also really, I mean, I believed in the cause that these people were fighting for, both in Turkey and here. So
Mhm.
um, I wanted to support it in whatever way that I could. Um, so I wanted to give it that sort of, to lend it that dignity. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
put it on the level of like you know, paintings like Guernica or something like that. Not that I'm that great a painter, like as I'm not like Picasso or anything, but I wanted to um, I wanted to show these people's experience, people that I was photographing. So it really was important for me to uh, capture this emotion of what was happening at the time. So a lot of
Well, it's something I've always looked at, like, yeah, and so for anybody who's been to any type of art school or design school, like, so I had to take history of art and architecture, and it's like when you're looking at like historical, when you look at the art of a historical period, it tells you the emotion of that moment rather than just the facts and figures that a history book might say. Like, because I think that art is a way to convey the humanity of what happened, as opposed to, you know, there was this happened, then this happened, then this person took power. And like, well, there was a lot of people that had to live through that. And what does that feel like? So when I was looking at your work on your website, it feels very much like a painter's a painter's adaptation of a street photographer. Like, it feels like photojournalism, but done through a lens of emotion. And I thought that was really a powerful way to like convey that, because it felt on the ground.
Thank you, because I really did try to shoot for that. I mean, I wanted to make it clear that I was there. Like, these are from reference photos that I took. Sometimes I would take the photos and you know chop them up in Photoshop and kind of rearrange them into more sort of classical looking, because with street photography it's really hard to get the exact composition that you want.
Mhm.
So because I had the chance to paint it, I tweaked the compositions, but every event, every person you see in there they were there, they were going through some stuff.
Yeah.
um and it was
Um,
really moving to me. It's like I couldn't not paint it. It felt so important. I don't know. It was important to me. It felt like it was historical. I felt like I had to do something about it with it.
and when you start a painting, you've talked about you capture it as like a reference photo, and you might jig the things around and stuff. But do you set out like, I want people to know about this, or do you set out like, I want people to feel this emotion because this is how it's made me feel? Do you set out with like a set emotion that you want people to feel when they look at your art?
Not not necessarily. Well, I guess empathy. I mean, or at least sympathy. I want them to feel whatever the person in the photo is feeling. To give them a sense of like what those people are going through. It's That's how I would kind of choose which images to work from. I'd take, almost like a spray and pray kind of like photography approach, and then I would sort through all these photographs later and find the ones that like struck me the most. And then if there were certain people that were in one photograph were that would work well with an image in another photograph, then I would combine them in Photoshop. But yeah, I want people to feel whatever they feel about it, but I want them to feel something. I want them to try to identify with the people
Mhm.
I'm depicting.
How big are these pieces? Like, it's like, because your approach feels like it's a very much a first person. The viewer is meant to be in the moment. So like, how big do you make those pieces to accentuate that, or is it like you hope, like, do you play with scale in order to like ensure that they're in the moment?
Yeah, they're pretty big. Um, the the two that are like sort of like the long landscape format are about like 8 feet by something like 3.5 feet.
Wow.
And I tried to, or actually I did. I copied uh, the format ratio for uh, old school like Panavision films, like uh, Lawrence of Arabia and stuff like that, because I wanted to get that sort of. It has a nice way of like incorporating the landscape, but also you get these huge details of people's faces and stuff like that. So it really does kind of put you in the place. So that's what I was sort of shooting for. And then some of the other paintings I did were like 35 millimeter, like standard ratio. They were all the ones I did of the protests were, I based them on like film screen ratios to sort of capture that
Yeah,
cinematic effect, even if it's subconscious. Yeah.
that's very cool. Like, and we've noticed this the more like because we talk to creatives of every different like medium and fill in different lanes, but like one thing we're noticing is like the inspiration that crosses over, like being able to take like we consume film in a way, and so like the that's bound to influence how we frame other things. It's like and you know or the way cameras were like the digital camera was just mimicking what a film camera could do. Like now they're starting to move into newer technology, but it's still based upon the sensor of a digital camera is still based upon like a 35 millimeter or medium format, or it's they still start from the same place.
Right. And even the videos that I shot, like I shot them on a DSLR, so there's still like a mirror in there. You know what I mean? There's still a connection to the old school filmmaking, even though there's a sensor instead of whatever it is. What I want to say cellulose, but that's not what it is. Whatever
Oh
that
yeah,
film material is made out of.
And if someone hadn't seen any of your work before, how would you describe your style? I know you mentioned like you want it to be like a historical painting. So is that the style you do it in, or do you do like really abstract? Like how do you kind of how would you describe your style for those listening?
Um, as a figurative painter, I have a real big like affinity for um, especially like Baroque like time period paintings, like Velasquez and Caravaggio and stuff like that. But I also am a big fan of um, sort of turn of the century painters, like American painters like Whistler and John Singer Sargent and things like that. Um, but then I also really like the early um, photorealist painters like Robert Bechtel. So it's kind of like a mashup of all those things. Um, I think the way people paint now, like the things you see on Instagram and stuff like that, those seem way more like photorealistic to me than Robert Bechtel's paintings were. His paintings were, I mean, they were based on like Polaroid photos of suburbia in San Francisco in like the 70s, but there's you see them up close, they're still very painterly. You know, they're obviously painted. So I think I just love paint. You know?
yeah.
Mhm.
But I also love what you can do with it to depict people. Um, did that
Now,
answer your question?
Yeah, it
how do
did.
you
Yeah.
play? Yeah, like so with your love of paint. So I was an art student in high school. Painting was my worst. It was just a medium that I just couldn't. It was not. I was not good at it. Um, yeah, I was much more into like charcoals and sketching, and then I went to architecture school because I'm like, all right, I'll do buildings, and that's structural.
Mhm.
But painting has, there's color and depth, but there's like some painters like have signature texture. Like, how much do you play with your texture, and how important is texture to your paintings? Because I know some of the photorealistic, they try to make it as seamless as possible. Where others say like Van Gogh, where it's like the texture is the story. Like it's going to be glops of paint and really make it almost add a dimension to it. So how much is texture like how much does that inform your paintings?
It matters to me a lot. I like painting on canvas specifically because of the texture that it has. Like, um, I think the way it kind of resists the paint as you're putting it on there, like you can do a lot with that. You can simulate other textures. It's like texture that looks like other things. Like, for example, I was doing a painting of a guy wearing jeans, and I simulated the texture of the fabric of the jeans by using the texture of the fabric in the canvas, if that makes any sense, by sort of
Yeah.
skating highlights atop the surf. I like playing with it with stuff like that. I used to be really into doing like super chunky, almost more like Van Gogh. I went through like a phase where I was really, really into Van Gogh, and I really wanted to paint like him. But then I realized by the end of it that I just couldn't. Like, so, it's deceptively simple looking what he did, and I think it was really kind of amazing.
Isn't that like kind of like the story of like most of the greats? It's like it
Yeah.
feels like I remember when I went to, I think it was in Barcelona, the Picasso Museum, and seeing Picasso's early works, and almost like he got bored with like his realism, and then that's when he started to deconstruct. He's like, and it's not like he landed in, it's not like he started in cubism and an abstract. Like he was a hell of a realistic painter before he was just like, okay, I'm just gonna now like break this apart. And like now it seems like when you look at some of the work, you're like, oh well, that's just components pulled together. But like how he got there is a journey.
Yeah, he could paint like, the old masters by the time he was 12 years old. Like, it was just, he's a prodigy. I'm sure he was like bored. you know um but yeah, I want the painters that I like the most, are the ones that, like, from a distance you'll see the painting and it does look like an image, like almost possibly photographic, but then you get up close to it and it breaks apart. Like, it becomes more like an abstract painting up close, like each little part, like you can see the paint texture, you can see brush marks, things like that. The best painter from art history that I can think of that was like a master of that was Velasquez. Like, he just, like, that's what I aspire to be. To paint like, something. And I really am into, although I don't really incorporate it a lot into my work, I really like the history of Chinese art as well, for the same reason. It's like, everything up close is almost like calligraphy, these practice little marks, and then from a distance they turn into an image. Like, I really enjoy stuff like that, especially like, bamboo painting. It's just like they do these images that are just like a little bamboo bush or segment of a forest or something like that, and the whole image is created with like 4 marks, and they just vary those 4 marks till it turns into uh, an image. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I really like.
Oh wow.
Almost like optical illusion-y.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they have a way of just placing the brush, holding it a certain way with a certain amount of ink on it, and moving it a certain way, and it's a 3-dimensional stalk of bamboo, just 1 mark, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just going back to what influences you, sorry, John.
Hmm.
And obviously we talked about conflict, and you felt like compelled to want to do something about that. So if we woke up tomorrow and there was no conflict in the world whatsoever, what would you be inspired by? Like, how would
Well,
you?
actually, I think I'm kind of over the conflict thing for now. I just got I honestly got really emotionally involved with it, and it kind of became, I mean, a decade of just obsessing over the news and going to just seeing the worst of people all the time, also the best of people, but then seeing those people get shot with rubber bullets or tear gas or whatever, you know what I mean? It gets to you after a while. And then by the time 2020 rolled around, I think the awareness was raised. The awareness was already up there. Do you want me to stop for a second? Somebody's hammering upstairs. Could
I
you
can't hear that.
Oh, okay.
I can hear it a little bit, but it's fine. Yeah.
I can't hear it at all.
I apologize for all this background noise. I'm sorry.
Nah, no worries. We are, I don't know if you noticed, we're kind of like a bootstrapping organization over here. We're just kind of
Yeah.
like,
But okay, so by the time 2020 rolled around, everybody knew about the protests that were happening all throughout the country.
Mhm.
So it started to feel like if I continued working in that vein, it would become like it would appear like hopping on a bandwagon or like exploitation or something. So I, once it was already in the popular consciousness, I felt like doing it any more paintings like that would not be ethical. I don't
Okay.
like. So what happened was I kind of did a complete sort of 180, and instead of doing these giant like mural sized paintings of conflict and stuff of other people's issues, I started doing these really small self portraits.
Okay.
And so I did about, I think I plan to do more actually, but I did about 8 of those, and those were just kind of based on my experience during the lockdown. Can you hear that?
Yeah. Okay.
No.
I'm so sorry.
No. Well, what's funny is that like when it was happening, like I live in a row home in South Philly. Like I have houses like all like there's no backyards. It's like everything. So there's always a house under construction. Like just so I usually just hear hammering noises throughout the day. Like so I didn't even think anything of it, but I heard it. But I just assumed it was somebody somewhere in the neighborhood, like putting putting it because there's always construction going on.
Yeah, I'm
I can't
sorry.
hear
I think
anything
it's
at
like
all.
somebody like tacking down carpet or something, but I could just ignore it. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Cut that part.
Put my hand
Okay,
behind
where
to now.
where were we? We were okay. I was talking about uh, I started doing these very personal things, and I guess the only connection was that it was still meant to be about the emotional experience, but this time the subject was me instead of other people. So I started doing those paintings, actually not even intending to show them to anyone. It was just something because I lost my job at the beginning, and then when I went back to work, I was teaching online, and my wife was an essential worker. She's a preschool teacher, but she would be gone all day, and then she'd be so tired that it would be hard to like talk to her at night. So I started to feel really isolated. So it was just
Mhm.
me and my cat, and my dog, and so that's what I painted, like just our what we did throughout the day, just sort of locked in this tiny apartment.
Yeah, well, it was funny because like those are like right on your website, and like I saw like a couple of and I think that like just like with the protests, like it it was a look into what a lot of us experienced during that period of time. Like the world was on fire, but everybody had to stay home, and it was just like this weird place that I don't think that we fully have like I talk to people all the time, like we haven't fully processed the grief of what happened during that period. Like
Oh,
that was psychologically traumatizing for like the entire world. And like we're still dealing with the after effects of that.
absolutely. Um, I still I still am an instructor. I teach at a community college and like some community arts centers around town. But the kids I see in community college um, have, you know, just come out of high school, and like they're they're great, and I love teaching them. But there's a noticeable difference from before COVID to these kids who I can't even imagine spending 2 or 3 out of the 4 years of high school inside your house. Like,
Mhm.
and I think it affected them.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely did. And I feel so bad for them. You know, like I think
Like their personality or their ability or what?
it's kind of like it's sort of like their socialization. I think like they don't understand, for example, that if I'm like giving a lecture, that they probably shouldn't get up and like sharpen their pencil really loudly or like crumple a wad of paper. You know what I mean? They don't know how to interact with
Like
people.
social etiquette.
Yeah, they're learning it now. It's something that you don't think, but you learn when you're middle school, high school, and they just
Yeah.
never learned it. They're learning it now that they're in college.
And in a lot of ways, their social interactions are like, when you think about like how much social media has taken over people's lives. Like social media is basically about dunking on people for, for a lot of people. And it's just like these little 15-second snippets of like not having a real nuanced conversation. It's very
Right.
rage farming. And so like, I just don't think that like the access to like, especially in schools where schools are meant to allow kids to be wrong and explore. But like in social media, if you're wrong, like, you get hammered for
Pulled
it. It's
out.
not it. And it's just a different, they haven't had the nuance of experimentation to like really find who they are
Right.
in a time
They-
where their brains are still forming,
Right.
Yeah.
They live on there, or they had to live on there. I mean, they kind of lived on there before, but then they literally did. Like that was their whole social experience was online, and just the way that they're not aware that they've been manipulated the whole time. You know what I mean? By these algorithms that get them to click on stuff that make them feel like shit about themselves. Excuse my
Mhm.
language. You know,
It's okay.
it's,
Yeah.
it's awful. To have that be your only social experience. Like I can't imagine it.
Yeah. Do you think there's been any positive things that have come out of the art world from the lockdowns, or not really?
Um, yeah, definitely. I think I've seen multiple shows by people who sort of took advantage of that time to make new work, to change their work. Like, you know, Bo Burnham did this really amazing like documentary about himself, like a musical documentary. Like I don't know if you've heard of that one. I think it
I
was on
haven't seen it.
Netflix. He's a comedian, but he's a comedian that incorporates music.
Yeah,
And
I've seen some of his work, but I haven't seen that.
it's really great. Like it's surprisingly like deep and emotional. Like um, I
Yeah.
think there was a lot of really good work that came out of it. I mean, for me, um, I started out doing these paintings that were really just for me. Like I didn't intend anybody else to see them, but then I got such an immediate visceral response when I, on a whim, I put them on Instagram, that I decided to apply for a grant from the Phoenix Art Museum, and I ended up getting it. And I ended up getting like not only the grant, but I got to do a show at the Phoenix Art Museum, just from this group of paintings that
Wow.
I didn't even intend to show anybody. But it was like I think being artists yourself, you probably know like I think you do the best work most of the time when you don't care, like when you gave up. You know what I mean? Like when you're not trying to impress anybody anymore. Like that's when
Yeah,
it
yeah.
happens. And I think that
I
happened
was
for
going to ask you, it's funny you mentioned museums, because I was going to say, do you work with museums? Do you have regular shows? Like, do people buy your art? Like, how does that work?
um ever since I started working in the vein that like when I was living in Seattle, I sold paintings pretty regularly. But at the time I was painting a lot of uh animals and wildlife and stuff. Like I painted a lot of octopuses because again like I wanted to do something that was related to the environment that I lived in. And that's so like Seattle is the giant Pacific octopus is such like a secretly big part of the culture there. you know they like there's a video on YouTube of some out of towners catching an octopus and pulling it onto their boat, and these divers that were local just like basically screaming at them and trying to beat the crap out of them, and so they would let the octopus go. Like it was just such an amazing thing to see. And I lived not very far from the aquarium there, so I would go there and take photos, and then I would just take photos around downtown. It was really about the place. But I was saying, what was I saying?
About museums?
Since I
Originally
moved
started with
back,
museums.
I haven't sold as many paintings. um, I've sold more prints, and I've sold more. Like I do a lot of. I recently started doing murals, and most of my money that comes from painting comes from murals now. And I don't. I think it might be just a matter of fashion. You know what I mean? Like also, the subject matter I was painting before was really important to me, and I think people enjoyed it, but it's also not the kind of thing that you want like hanging over your couch, like, you know. So I didn't.
Well, it's funny, I've always thought about that. Like when you go into a museum, there's definitely paintings you appreciate what they are, but you're like, I wouldn't put this in my house, but it
Yeah,
feels right in the museum because it's telling a chapter of our history. Like, so I could totally see that being the thing. Like, it's not for private viewing. It is meant to be a public story.
yeah.
But I don't know how you make money off that. But like, I thought, like, but
It's hard. Like the only way to do it really is to apply for grants and things, and
yeah.
grants and fellowships, and that's really the only way to do it. And to aim at eventually a museum buying your stuff, like that's kind of the way to do it. But so in order for me to live, though, I have to, have my teaching day job, and then all my side hustles with like videography and photography and painting murals and things like that. Um, but that's where, as far as money from art goes, that's where I get it from. But my passion is still always painting. I mean, I feel like I can only do good work if I'm not trying to do it for anybody else, you know. And if nobody wants to buy it right now, then that's fine. Nobody bought any of Van Gogh's stuff while he was alive either. So
Thing is that you're still getting the artistic satisfaction out of creating that, right?
yeah, and I really I do get to exhibit it. Like I apply to a lot of juried shows and things like that in and around the state, and sometimes in other states. So that's how I kind of get like exposure for my work. Um, and as long as that's happening, I'm happy. I'm waiting to hear back from a school. Like I might be getting like a solo show at a community college here in like a couple months. So fingers crossed. Waiting to hear back from the jury. But
That's very cool, though.
yeah, it's very cool. It'll be my first one. Well, my first one since I was like in my 20s, but
Nice.
completely different.
How is like living in Arizona like changed like your style? Because like I haven't been in a number of years, but like I remember going there and it's like such a like the color palette is unique, like and stuff. Like if you've ever been, it's cities built in the middle of the desert, so you still have holdovers of like sand and cacti all over the place. Like it's a very like, so the architecture like in response has been, because it's browns and greens, it goes the other way and you have like these explosions of bright color to kind of like, and so like I always, and even like some of the Native American like history of like the arts there was like it was always like rich in color to basically as a response to the environment, which is very like void of bright tones.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I don't know if it's because I've lived here for so long, but at least this particular part of the desert, I don't really see it as being monotone anymore. It's like maybe I'm just more attuned to the nuances now, but like if you see like the Superstition Mountains at sunset, they're just like to the east of it's an area that was like sacred to the Apache. They're just to the east of Phoenix. There's nothing subtle about that. They look like they're on fire. Like
Oh
it's
wow,
crazy. If you drive up to Sedona in like the spring and you
that's
see,
gorgeous.
yeah, like if you see like the new growth on all the plants, that bright minty sort of green in contrast to the red rocks there, it literally like vibrates visually.
Oh
It's like
wow.
I mean that Sedona's like special in this area,
Yeah,
but
I was there for like I think for like a day. Because the company I used to work for had a location in Scottsdale, and one of the people who worked there, like a couple of us were visiting. She grew up in Flagstaff, so like we took the weekend. We went to Sedona for the day, and then we went to Flagstaff, and then came back down to fly back home. So I only got to do Sedona for a day, but it's an interesting place. It
really
is
is.
unlike anything I've ever seen. Um, like it's just stuff like the everything is the rocks, like it's all red. It's red dust. It's red. It's this
Yeah.
like it's
Like
this.
Mars.
It feels very much like, oh, and it's like they got a whole like subculture of like aliens and aura and like, a lot of like
Okay.
they're very like
It's just,
the people you run into there are like real like out there, like just in a cool way, but like way like just thinking about the world in like a very different metaphysical plane. It's like this like interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Just
like
on a
a
different
new
note, I
age
thought the
hub.
alien people were all near Albuquerque.
Roswell.
No,
It's
Roswell.
kind of all over the Southwest, to be honest.
Yeah.
For some reason, Roswell isn't terribly far from here. I'd say it's like maybe like a 6-hour drive or something. But yeah, the whole Southwest is not only, in my opinion, astoundingly beautiful, like in certain areas, like Sedona, certain parts of New Mexico, um, but it's also got that weird new agey vibe, and then that's connected to the alien thing, and like there's some Roswell is like where the UFO supposedly crashed.
Yeah, well, I think some of it is like because it was desert.
Uh-huh.
U.S. military did a lot of tests and a lot of things because there
Yes.
was nobody, because they didn't believe any. Now, granted, there were Native Americans who were living there, like, but they
Right.
just assumed nobody was there. So they did a lot of like test things out there, so people would see things that were experiments at the time, and just
You
one led
still
to the
do it.
other, and then
I mean,
conspiracy theories go on.
I did I did an artist residency. I spent 3 months in a little town near Alamogordo, New Mexico, which is close to where they did the atomic bomb testing. And I would see weird shit there too. I know there was like a military base there, but I remember for one, like I think it was Halloween night. I was sitting on a porch waiting for kids to come by, and I'm off in the distance. I see this like blue flash in the sky, and then the whole house shook. Like I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they were just like testing some kind of a bomb or something like that.
Yeah,
But it's not on the news or anything. Like you just see weird stuff because they're testing all this secret crap out there. Plus, the sky is
Absolutely.
just so big that you see everything in the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go back to your painting because we've got onto aliens.
Yeah, we got off the
Just
track.
going back
yeah.
to your painting. So you
His
decided
paintings are actually inspired by aliens. I don't think you picked up on that. Like it's very
I think my paintings definitely are, to go back to your question, definitely inspired by the whole landscape, the whole atmosphere here. But I don't know if it's in like a direct way. I don't think it can not affect you, but it would be hard for me to point out precisely where it's gotten into the work.
Yeah.
Maybe my palette might have changed a little bit. I think my palette's maybe narrowed. I like um, narrowed and focused.
But I'd be curious to look at your paintings like now through this lens of, because when you were talking about what you see now versus like, so I've been to Arizona maybe 3 or 4 times total, right? And never for more than a week. So I have not sat in the location long enough to see all of the little nuance and start to like play with those layers of tone. So I'd be curious, like the longer you've been there and now you're seeing things that the average person isn't going to see, one by training, but two by longevity. And it's like, I wonder if that like the way you paint is now like going to like pull those things out to say, I see this and you don't, and I'm going to show it to you, like
I hope
subconsciously.
so. I hope so. I mean, I think subconsciously things like that are inevitable. Like, I yeah, I think it can't help but get into you by being around it. And I think there's a reason that like artists tend to like migrate to the Southwest. Something that, if you're on the East Coast or in the big cities on the coast, like they kind of chuckle about it, like they giggle about it. But then once you come out here and spend time here, it gets to you, like it's moving.
Mhm.
It really is a unique place in the world. Like I've never seen anything else like it.
So talk to us about your process. So say you decided to do a certain painting, whatever that might be. You sit down and you go, right, I'm going to draw the perspective lines, then I'm going to add the sky, then I'm going to add or do you just kind of paint what feels right? Like, how do you go through that process from like the start to a finished product and know that it's finished?
I kind of I'll usually try to find a photographic reference. I'll usually tweak it a little bit in Photoshop. Um, you know, add things, remove things, change the composition, things like that. And then I start in a very traditional kind of way, because I was taught at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Like that's where academic painting started. So like I kind of, I guess, start in a more academic way. I'll usually stain the canvas, wipe out highlights, add darks, and and build it up in layers, like the whole thing at a time, rather than starting in one corner and just working across the whole thing. I try to work on it holistically. Um, and then I also try to leave room for improvisation a little bit. I'm not like a slave to the photo reference. I just, I want to get certain things out of it, but I also want to, um, I want it to look like a painting. I want the viewer to see the different textures and things like that. Did that answer your question, sort of?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it's always interesting because me and John have had the conversation that whilst we're both photographers and we use the same tools, our finished product couldn't be further from each other.
Yeah.
So mine's very surreal and fantasy, and whereas John is very real to life and he tells a story of that person's actual life. So I always like to ask that question around like how you create your finished product. And one thing I always do as well, I'd be like, right, it's finished. And then 2 days later, I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to have a little bit more. So I was always interested to see if you do that kind of thing as well, or or if you have something where you go, right, that isn't how
Yeah,
I'm done.
it's really hard to tell when you're finished, like doing a painting. It's I think you can keep working on it forever, really. Like it just,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to, like, I heard a quote from somebody somewhere, I think it may be falsely attributed to Picasso or something, that paintings are never finished, they're just abandoned. And I think that's accurate. I think you have to like,
Yeah.
you have to just let it go at some point.
I remember we used to say that in architecture school. It's like it's done when the deadline says it's done. Like
Right.
it's just and because we would sit there, we have our drawings up, have a professional architects give a critique of it, like during our final projects and things like that. And then they had ideas of where to take it. And one guy, this was my thesis. I was done. Like I was not, that was it. That was my last project of school. And the one guy was like, "Hey, we're not picking this apart. We're just designers, and we have other ideas." I'm like, "Don't worry about it, dude. Like, I don't have anything else to turn in. I'm done. So you guys can have at it." Like,
Yeah, both my thesis show and the recent museum show, I was painting until the night before installation. I was like hanging wet painting, so
oh
like,
wow.
yeah. So
Do you work on multiple simultaneously, or do you try to like finish a thought and then move on to the next thing? Like, what's your process for that?
I try to work on multiple things at the same time, because sometimes I like to do a glazing technique, and that takes a lot of time, like just to dry. So it's
Okay.
like you kind of have to like rotate things. So I try to have like, I think I probably have like three going right now.
What's the glazing? Is that like something that goes over the paint, or is that within the paint?
Yeah, it's a more it's actually the original way that oil painting was developed. Um, you paint sort of a black and white underpainting, and then all the color is added with transparent layers afterwards. So
Oh,
put in like you paint the whole painting in black and white, or sometimes it was like red and white or green and white, and then you add the color layer by layer on top of it. But it requires each layer to dry before you move on to the next layer. But that's how, I don't know if you've ever seen those like Flemish paintings of like um, really crazy detailed still lifes of like fish and fruit sitting on a table or something like that. That's how those paintings were done.
Oh wow, I never knew that.
No,
Yeah,
I didn't.
you can get some really amazing effects with it. It was really the Italians took it and they used it to um, like the body of Christ in paintings. You can really give it a sense of this like interior glow by using this technique. So I tried to apply that to some of the people I was painting in my paintings, both as a conceptual idea, but also because I wanted it to look the way those paintings look. But yeah, it takes time.
Yeah, as all good things do. So
I'm
what's the
coming.
big dream then?
No, sorry, what?
What's the big dream? So if you were like, oh, this is where I want to get to, this is what I want to do, or is it just to keep creating?
I think I would like to have like a nice professorship at like a small liberal arts college somewhere that would just, give me a solid living and retirement and allow me, actually require me to continue to paint like throughout my life. I mean, the painting is never going to go away. It's just like the sort of like piecemeal cobbling together of a living is exhausting, and like I would like that to go away at some point.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. John's a full-time photographer. I am not. I still have it because I only started photography last March.
okay.
So I still have a 9 to 5, and then I have my photography on top. And then obviously, when you do any kind of art, you have to have some kind of presence. So it's constantly like uploading to social, trying to be present on there, as well as editing and trying to arrange shooting and marketing. So yeah, I feel that when you're like, oh,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
exhausting. It is
I had a nine
exhausting.
to five. I had a 9 to 5 until I started. Well, even my early teaching was 9 to 5, and it's so hard to like be creative on nights and weekends.
Yeah, yeah,
It's really
yeah.
rough.
I'm currently I've closed my books now till 2024 because I was like, I need some breathing space because I've been chocker. So I feel you with that. So just before we wrap it up, where can people find you? Where can they find your art? Where can they follow what you're doing?
ChrisVena.com. You could also go to my Instagram account. That's where my most recent stuff gets posted. I really have been. I need to update my. I need to update my website. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because I know something that I'm gonna be a part of soon, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say yet. But I'm just gonna say it
Oh,
right.
okay.
I'm going to be in the new issue of New American Paintings. So,
Oh
like,
wow.
Ooh,
yeah, I'm
that's
very
cool.
excited about that. Lisa was in it a few years ago. Um, but so, yeah, people will be able to see me there probably next month. Um, and then my Instagram account is chrisvena.art. And yeah, that's about it. I have a Facebook account, but it's mostly just for talking to my relatives and stuff.
Okay.
And I haven't dipped my toe into the TikTok waters yet. I'm thinking about it, but I don't know how that would look or what that would be.
Yeah, I think
I
that
really
for
rate
you, it's
TikTok.
like it would probably be more of the behind the scenes stuff, like
Yeah.
like little snippets of you like working on like different stages, but speed up the video. TikTok's actually how we met.
Oh,
Um,
really?
Yeah.
yeah, like because she's in the UK and I'm in Philly,
Yeah.
and it's like we met on TikTok because our styles are so different. We started a conversation and then we hopped on a Zoom and we're like, you know what? This could be a podcast where we just talk to creative people about like differences in creativity. Like the idea being is that like we all do it differently. We have different inspirations, we have different processes, we have different outputs, but like the thing we share is that we make something new and we put it out into the world, and that's the thing we share, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's what art is, and we allow people to respond to it and then see where it goes from there,
It's great. I love talking to other artists too.
Now, before we go, what, and I think it was a musician that I heard say this, but like I started to think about it really in terms of any type of art form, because somebody asked about like an interpretation of a song he had written, and he had said, here's the deal, I write the song, I perform it, and once I publish it, it's not mine anymore. It is now whoever consumes it, like whatever they get out of it, that's what they get out of it. And that's not for me to tell them that they're wrong. And I thought, oh wow, that's something that is shared with art, because it's like once you could have a message, but once you put it out there, it's however the viewer takes it in, and that's now the message of that piece.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%.
Quite like the idea of that as well.
Well,
Well, thank
it's
you very
something you
much.
have to get comfortable. It's something you have to get comfortable with, because if you were saying, I want to express this point of view, and no one sees it, like that could be a little bit like ego upsetting. But the thing is that they're responding to it, and if they see something in it that you don't, it's like, okay, well, that's what art is. I have a singular point of view, and they have a different point of view, and that makes it interesting to me. But for some artists, it like could be upsetting because that was not the intent of the work, and so I think it's like you're trying to play with that line and not get like too upset when it comes to like public discourse around a piece.
Right. But like I think it's inevitable. Like you can try all you want. I think that's why personally with those protest paintings, I tried to focus more on the expressions of the people rather than having it be, I had posters and stuff, but I a lot of times I just blanked out what was on the posters so that you can focus on the people rather than having it be some kind of a polemic or something. But yeah, you can't, and you can't control it. And I think there's something kind of liberating about like letting it go like that.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this was fantastic. It was great, like to learn about your process and how you go about your art form. It's fascinating to be sure.
Yeah, I'd agree. Really cool.
Thank you. It was really great talking to you guys too. I really appreciate this. I'll find your TikTok accounts and I'll
yeah. We'll slowly indoctrinate you into the TikTok community.
Right. I'll pick up some pointers from you all.